I've only done one tutorial so far. But let's open with prayer. Sorry. No. Okay. Can you open us with prayer?
God, we thank you so much for this day and just the chance to study your word. Please give us a joyful spirit as we do it and as we seek to find your truth and to honor you in everything that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Dad.
He's picking up one of my sons. Okay, so let's just briefly review. I gave you the pictures so I don't have to talk as much. You can see in that first section, it says 1 through 2, but really it's 1 through 5. I think they were just trying to emphasize the New Jerusalem aspect, which is in 2 there.
It could be fun to take your written notes, not now, but later, written notes from last week and compare and see how the pictures kind of line up. But just so you can see if your understanding matches.
Okay, so that was, how bad it is, and that they're going to get punished, but the punishment can be a purifying fire. And then in chapter 6, there's his vision of the Lord on his throne, and you remember all that. The picture helps. And now he's going to have to go preach. And then 7 through 12 is the failure of David's dynasty and the coming of a new David. So David had a dynasty that was supposed to last forever, but it failed, and you see that happening in Isaiah. And you see it, of course, in Kings and Chronicles. But you see it in Isaiah, but there's going to be a new David. Not just a descendant of David, a new David. And then last week, we're on to 13 through 27. We covered the first part of that, which is the judgment on the nations. We went through all these different nations, 10 different nations listed. Well, Babylon was twice, so really 9. But and how God's going to be brought down. They thought they were so...
God's going to bring them down.
Mm-hmm.
God won't be brought down.
Oh, did I say that?
Yeah,
I did not mean that. God is going to cause them to be brought down. So now is the other part of the nations. That was the judgment of the nations. Today is the hope of the nations. And that hope of the nations, 24 through 27, is the tale of 2 cities. There's the lofty city and the New Jerusalem compared. So what's great about this little section, these 4 chapters, 24 through 27, is that it's all a big chiasm. Does anyone know what a chiasm is?
I've heard one preached.
You ever heard the word chiasm? It's the Greek letter chi is shaped like our X, so it essentially just means shaped like an X. And an X, of course, the top corresponds, the width of the top corresponds with the width of the bottom.
It looks the same on the top as it does.
Yeah, and there's a focal point in the middle. So that's the basic, and I wrote a silly chiasm on the next page, just to give you an example.
This is just to familiarize you
with the concept, because it's
going
to come up a lot in today's lesson. a lot. So, can you read this chiasm?
Yeah. Is your mic and everything recording?
Yep.
Bob drove to work. As soon as he walked in, his boss yelled at him. He was harassed all day long with stressful situations. His home life, however, was relaxing. His wife always kissed him in the doorway after his drive home.
So you can see Bob drove to work, something about his drive home. Then the middle 2 lines, as soon as he walked in, his boss yelled at him. His wife kissed him in the doorway. It's not repeating a word, but it's the concept there. Sometimes it's a key word that'll get repeated, like drive in the first 2. Sometimes it's a concept. He immediately is greeted with yelling. He's immediately greeted with a kiss. And then the center there, his whole time at work is stressful. His whole time at home is relaxing. And that's supposed to be the focus. Now, if I would have wanted to spend a lot of time on this, I could have had a more significant focus. But What were you going to say?
I was going to say, so you can see how that gave an X.
Yeah. And sometimes the middle is two lines like that, just so that the focus is a contrast. Sometimes there will actually be another line in between the, see the middle two meet. There could be one in the very center that the whole thing is pointing to one line. And it has no parallels, but it's the focus of it. So it just depends on
But
how...
in this case, the focal point is the contrast between the two. So
Yeah.
that is the focus.
Yes.
Anyway.
Typically, the point of an author using a chiasm is a way of highlighting something. And if that's the most important thing, then that focus will inform your understanding of the whole thing. So you say, well, if this is the focus, that means I need to think about all the rest of it in light of that. That helps you understand that. And sometimes it wants you to compare, like, the driving to work and driving home. It wants you to compare those two. But in this case, there's not a lot of significance with, well, his drive to work would be the reverse of his drive home. I mean, I guess, but that's not the point. The point is what's in the middle. So that is an example of made-up chiasm. Now we'll do an example of a chiasm in the Bible. Let's look at Genesis 11. A very simple, short chiasm in the Bible. It's simple compared to other biblical chiasms, but it's way complicated compared to the one we just went through.
Genesis 11.
Yes, the Tower of Babel story is a chiasm. It's about, I don't know how many verses. 10 verses? 9 verses? So, if you want to have someone read it.
Yeah, we need a volunteer to read it aloud. If anybody would like to. 11. No, just 1 through 9.
And then she'll stop you when she wants to point something out.
Now the whole earth had one language.
Okay, well, do you mean let's let them read it through once, so they're familiar with the story.
Okay.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, wait. Yeah. Okay, you're right. You're right. Go ahead, read it through.
Now the whole earth had one language and the same words, and as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had bricks for stone and bitumen
Yeah.
and for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and therefore confuse their language, so they may not understand one another's speech." The Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth.
Okay.
You don't have to have them read it again, but just explain the chiasm.
So in verse 1, I'm going to write these with letters, and I'm going to do the first half, the top portion of the chiasm, and then I'll let you guys see if you can fill in the bottom half. So A, we have the whole world.
What verse is that in?
That's in 11:1. And then they had one language, right? And then they came from where? Where does it say they came from? Shinar. And settled there. And that's in verse 2. D is come, let us make bricks. Should I talk there about the technology? Let's do that.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting, like it talks about how they made the bricks instead of the stone. And I think you said bitumen or bitumen.
Yeah.
Other versions say tar instead of mortar, right? And that's significant, like why would it tell you like how they were doing it? But the point is that God made stones and God made mortar, but they were like, no, we're not gonna use that. We're gonna use our technology. We know how to make bricks. We know how to make this special tar. And we're gonna use our technology to build it. We're gonna reject what God made.
We don't think of a brick as technology because we think of like a computer or a TV as technology. But just think what an advancement that was. Instead of having to find a stone that is the right shape to go on the next part, you can just make them. And they're perfectly shaped. All of a sudden building a house or a tower or anything became way easier once you had that technology to make bricks.
Okay, and then right here, this would be the center of the kayaks. You can see that that's kind of intimidating, but the Lord came down. You don't hear that too often in the Bible. Okay, so then reading from verse 5, can you read that again, verse 5?
And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the
So, time out like that. So that corresponds here with F, to see the city and the tower. You can see that repeated. That's still in verse 5. And then keep going.
see the city and the tower which the children of man had built.
Okay? So which
Stand over here so they can see what you're
the people were building.
And let me just add that some authors, when they're doing this, they'll call this F1 and F2 and E1 and E2 if they want to refer to those.
Okay, so who thinks they can find the corresponder for this D?
What verse is it?
But the one for D occurs in verse 7. So you're going to see the same kind of language.
What's your question?
We're looking for what corresponds with D here. They said, come, let us make bricks. And we're trying to find something that corresponds with that from verse 7. This was a little different.
Let us go down and confuse their language.
Yes, that is the same language used.
So God says, come, let's go confuse their language.
Let us go down. Get confused. Okay? What about C? It says here, they came from Shinar and settled there. So we have a place name.
At 8, the Lord scattered them abroad. Would that be?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. This one says, can you read verse 9?
Verse 9?
Its name was called Babel because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth.
Okay. This one says Babel.
And instead of settled, they're, what did you say? Scattered?
Yeah.
Scattered.
Yeah.
Then they were scattered.
So it's,
Okay, and then for B, they had one language. And then also from verse 9,
anybody see a corresponding thing?
they had one language, but then in verse 9 it says,
Multiple.
yeah, the Lord confused their language. Like here he says he's gonna do it, and here's when he does it. Okay, and then the last one. And then the last one is just, it says the whole world, right? So that sort of is like the tip off. Like when somebody's reading this passage, they're like, okay, this is like a little nice story. It's a 9-verse story. And it starts with the whole world, and it ends with the whole world. That might be a little yellow flag saying, hey, maybe we could find something here. Is there a structure here? Because there won't always be a chiasm everywhere in the Bible, but sometimes you can find little tip-offs.
Yeah, and sometimes it'll be a key word, sometimes it'll be a key concept.
Or repeated phrases.
And what a chiasm is supposed to do, you might be thinking, well, that's interesting, but how does that help me understand the passage? A chiasm points to one thing, God came down. Well, that seems kind of incidental. At first, that seems incidental to the passage. If you tell someone that, you don't tell, you're like, so these people built this tower, and God changed their languages. You don't tell them the part about when God came down to look around. It seems incidental to the story, but actually, if you think about it, they're trying to make a tower and the top will reach the heavens. But to see the tower, God has to come down. They didn't reach the heavens. He's infinitely above that. He has to come down and look around and say, this is not good. So,
Oh, I always thought it was just like, if you go to the front door and it's locked, and you're working real hard trying to open the front door and climb through, and then your wife just comes and like opens the door. You're like, I was working so hard, but like, God had the power just to meet them.
right, yeah.
Everything they were doing was futile.
Oh, they were trying to meet God?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think they were trying to meet God. I think they were trying to be God. Think about part of what it is if they're with this technology and them all working together, nothing will be impossible for them. And we're seeing that today. Just like things that seemed impossible back then are now just like normal. Yeah, I can just like pull up this thing and talk to someone on the other side of the world and see their face. Their power is in, like technology is in working together. Nobody develops technologies on their own. No one person stranded on an island, discovers new, I don't know, a new way to make a computer bit. I don't know. But the point is mankind working together that does that. And so what God does is confuse their languages. Now, we're in an age now where we have the universal language of mathematics. We've again acquired a universal language. That's why you're seeing technology rise so fast, because we can work with the Chinese on technology and stuff. But anyway, so the point is it's about mankind's power versus God's power. Mankind, we were going to make it ourselves, and God's saying, no, you're not going to make it yourselves. We want to make a name for ourselves. Remember, that's why they want to do it, want to make a name. God said, no, I'm going to change your name, and you're going to be dispersed. So about man reaching up for independence, for self-sufficiency, for honor. That's what a name is about. It's about getting honor. All those things, in all those ways, they're aspiring to be God.
Jacob, just a question. The time of Genesis, Moses supposedly wrote this, there were very few people that even could read, and even fewer could write. You must be a genius to do that at that stage. I mean, that's just unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. It is a work of unparalleled genius in the history of the world. I think that he was one of the most educated men of his day, because he was raised in Pharaoh's household, so he would have been educated. He would have been bilingual, because his mom, a Jewish woman, raised him, and then by the time he was 4 or something, and then he was raised in a new home. So he was one of the few people who were bilingual in that country. And think about what it does to you to be raised in a place and educated in a place where you're always like, is that really right? Like, I'm part of this Egyptian world, but I'm not an Egyptian. And so instead of just like, okay, yeah, when we die, we go to the duat. That's where the Egyptians thought you went. And he's like, okay, so my teacher's telling me when we die, we go to the duat, but is that true? Because my mom said that's not what happens when we die. And so his whole life, he's constantly thinking through things. I mean, that just sets him up. And then he has 40 years in the desert as a shepherd to sort of let all those things ruminate.
So similar to Saul, too. Saul was went through the transformation, became a Christian, very similar.
Yeah, very educated. Yeah, God uses people's in different ways. Now, what?
No, it's a good point.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Two of the biggest writers in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the Jewish people, you're right, probably most of them couldn't read when they came out, but suddenly they had a really good reason, and they became one of the most literate groups in history because the scriptures were so important to them. But anyway...
but that's an example of a chiasm, okay? Do you have a question about it?
It's funny that at the end of verse 4, where they're saying we're going to do this, we're going to make a name for ourselves, they say otherwise we'll be scared to go out over the face of the whole earth. And that's the very ending of verse 9. So they did this so that they wouldn't happen, but because they did it,
It happened, yeah.
God
Yeah.
understands like irony better than we do. And on the other hand, it said that we may make a name for ourselves, and then it says he does give them a name. It's like Babel's been a bad connotation.
but it kind of reminds you of the Garden of Eden, too, that Satan used that, lest you be like God. So they're kind of saying the same thing here. We got to do this, otherwise this is going to happen.
And again, it's with,
Temptation.
knowledge is a key part of it.
Yeah.
Human knowledge and civilization, that's what was part of what tempted them. They wanted to have that knowledge for themselves and decide for themselves what was good and evil, instead of letting God do it. Very similar things
Just
here.
out of curiosity, just as the exercise of discovering a chiasm, if I were to tell you that there was a chiasm in those 9 verses, do you think you could have organized it? Just a question.
Some of it.
Some of it?
Um,
Is it with a K or a C?
CH.
chiasm, according to one of my Greek professors. The other one didn't say it that way, so who knows. But anyway,
That X is like the same letter that's at the beginning of Christian or Christ or Christmas.
Roman numerals.
Yeah.
okay, so now we're in these chapters, and I
That's why when people say X's, they're not always like crossing out Jesus.
okay, the side note. Yes. Okay. So I have our passage here. Now we went in and out to show our chiasm. We could have done it over here, in and then back up. And instead of paralleling this way, we've been paralleling this way. No, it's fine. That's just the way I did our chapter here. So what I just photocopied the pages out of the Bible, and then just taped them up on this board. It doesn't look like much, but the point, so here's just the different sections of it. There's the key one at the bottom, and then the other ones. So this is the beginning and the end of chapters 24 through 27. The point of showing you this, there's a couple points, but one of them is to say, if you want to make more out of your time in the Word, try something different. I like to sit and contemplatively, I don't know, read, in the morning on the porch with my coffee, and it can be like a real, meditative time. But and that's good. But I also like to get it up on the wall, and I'm circling things, and I didn't do it the way I would have because I knew I was going to show you this. But I'm circling and drawing and making connections
It's
between.
like a beautiful mind. Isn't that movie? It's all crazy. That's what it was. There's like
What are you calling your house?
but like there's several rooms in our house where the wall is just
Covered in Bible
James
passages.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, yeah. So this, for me, this just helps me see it and make connections, and then I have to keep this for as long as I'm studying it, because now in my mind when I'm thinking of that passage, I'm not like, oh, that's chapter 27. I'm like, oh, that's the part that's up here. So that's just kind of how I learn the passage, and then
Also, you can't sit down.
sometimes
You can stand up and walk
get.
back and forth and
It helps me to be on my feet too, to keep me focusing. But for today, these chapters is about the lofty city versus the New Jerusalem, and it's all mixed in, but primarily this first half is about the lofty city and its downfall, and then the New Jerusalem. So the city of mankind, which I know you think we wasted a lot of time just talking about a chiasm from Babel, but that passage is referenced here in a big way. So that concept of mankind striving for self-sufficiency and to make a name for themselves, that is what's in the back of Isaiah's mind while he's writing this. And he's talking about the lofty city. There's not one particular city, although in Isaiah's era, it is Babylon. And by the way, Babel and Babylon in Hebrew, same exact spelling. So he's thinking ancient Babylon was a symbol for humanism, for mankind saying we can do this on our own. With our own technology, with our own cleverness, with our own strength, we can be our own gods. And he's saying, he's sort of using that as a reference to say, current Babylon is going to fall in the same way. But not just current Babylon. The spirit, like the Babylonian spirit in all humanity that wants to be self-sufficient and wants to make their own rules and wants to impose their own order on the world and say, this is how it's going to be. We're not going to be scattered. We're going to be here, and we're going to do it. We're going to make a name for ourselves. They want that honor. They want everything. That spirit pervades human culture all around the world. So this lofty city references, it's the whole world. It's the whole earth.
Did you see how there were three references in the ancient city of Babel? For that time, modern city of Babylon, and then sort of the spirit of Babylon.
Yeah.
All of mankind.
So Tower of Babel, Isaiah's Babylon, and then the spirit of Babylon, which is why you read in Revelation, and it's like, Babylon's back again? What? It's talking about this lofty city of Babylon that's all humanity. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, with our remaining time, we're going to focus on the lofty city just in these three sections. We're going to spend a lot of time on that. And then very briefly, just hit some key points about the New Jerusalem on the other side. So,
that's the next page in your notes. The first, this is a chiasm as well.
So you really should go like this. Have opposite.
yes. Well, no, actually, I should have done it that way, but I was thinking like this.
He has organized it in the direction that I did it on the board.
Yeah. So,
So the first page should go on top like this.
so you've got the center here, the edge with the edge, the middle with the middle, and then the center on the far right.
Oh, okay.
Now this is, it's really interesting because this whole thing is a chiasm, but within that chiasm there's another one here, and within this one there's an even smaller one here. So let's start out with that. It is
Do the most zoomed in.
the most zoomed in is verses 7 through 12. And you can see that I arranged that little block of text as a chiasm.
So you're just trying to figure out like why he arranged it that way, what the themes are, or the repeated ideas, whatever clues.
So just take a minute and look over that and see if you can, yeah.
Verses 7 through 12.
Verses 7 through 12. And the fact that it's a chiasm isn't super important other than the fact that it highlights verse 10. But just see if you can understand or make any connections or contrasts in those verses. Okay, I know that you're probably just getting started, but we have to make much of time. So did anybody notice anything interesting in 7 through 12? There's no wrong answers if it's just interesting.
Well, one time they were happy, joyful, making song, and the next day they were not.
Yeah, good. Look at 7. New wine dries up, vine withers, merrymakers groan, joyful timbrels stilled, noise stopped, harp silent, song no longer. I even inverted verse 9, that first line of verse 9, to mirror the Hebrew image. The Hebrew order of it, because it keeps in step with 7, 8, and 9, how they have a good thing and then a bad thing. Song no longer. Beer bitter. Good, excellent.
Some of it's a little strange. I'm looking at the joyful timbrels are stilled, and then all joyful sounds have vanished from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So some.
Yeah, it definitely is. That is part of the chiastic structure.
It's
So-
opposite. It's the one the other direction.
Yeah, sometimes the chiasm will want you to make contrasts, sometimes comparisons. It's a very versatile thing to do, or structure.
Well, I say for the first two, they're very so similar. The new wine dries up and the vine withers. That's like almost a reinforcing statement.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Well, why would they do that?
Well, part of it is, this is poetry.
Oh,
Isaiah was a poet. Basically, the whole book is poetry except a section in the middle, a few chapters in the middle.
what languages is this?
Hebrew.
Hebrew, originally Hebrew.
Yeah, and that's part of the way they do their poetry. You'll notice in the Psalms they do that all the time, and in Proverbs too. They'll say something and they'll say it in a different way. And sometimes it'll just be repetition. Sometimes it'll be emphasizing a specific aspect. You know what I mean?
But he's right. It says about the wine and the vine in verse 7. And they both dry up and wither. And then it kind of does another duel in verse 12. But
There's a
some,
lot of them. Even
but
like-
something is disintegrating there, but it's not a vine and it's not
Okay.
wine. So it's
Like in-
replaced with what?
The city and the gate.
It's the city and its gate. And Jacob was saying, back then, if you think of a city, it's sort of synonymous with its gate. It wasn't
So
any
its
cities,
walls.
and its walls. That was what defined a city. It wasn't just a little shepherding village. The city had walls. So it is another name for it in the same way.
So, contrast and comparison between 7 and 12. In 7, their source of happiness is ruined, and in 12, their source of security is ruined. It focuses on, the focus there is verse 10, and we need to talk about that because it says, the ruined city lies desolate. That word ruined in Hebrew is a very rare word, and it's the same word from Genesis, the very opening statements of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. That without form is the same word here, tohu. So, think about God creating the world, right? Yeah, if it'd be brief, yeah.
Oh, yeah. When we think of God creating the world, we think of him, putting the trees or putting the people and the animals, right? But if you think about how it opens up the world before he begins his creation, it says, without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. There was darkness, there was water. And that's sort of the image of chaos. And so when you see God suddenly moving the waters so that dry land appears, that's what it said, and suddenly there's like light and he puts it into stars and sun and moon, he's creating order. So that's what's glorious about his creation, is that there was all this chaos, and he's got now days and nights and timetables for seasons, and everything is being ordered. And so that's the idea of the ruined city, is that it's not.
Now, do you see this technique at all in the New Testament? So primarily in the Old Testament?
It is used less in the New Testament. One scholar, there's definitely chiasms. Is that what you mean by chiasms? Is that what you mean by technique?
Yeah, in the New Testament.
There's definitely chiasms in the New Testament. They're not used as much. But one scholar says, and I have not traced this out to verify, but that all of Luke and Acts, which were written by the same guy, is a big chiasm. I don't know if that's true, but one scholar,
You find out. Tell us next week. That's great.
one scholar earned his dissertation.
Yahoo it.
Just a quick note also about Babel, taking what we learned about like chaos versus order from creation. When we're talking about the Tower of Babel, what did they want to avoid? Does it say in verse 3? They wanted to avoid being scattered. And so they were wanting to avoid that chaos, but then they used their own methods and their own technology and their own people to try to solve that problem, when really God is supposed to be the one that orders the chaos.
Yeah, they were imposing their own order on their world
Right.
with city life,
And
which
that always
is,
goes awry.
city life was not viewed positively in Genesis.
Do we know the person who was directing this project at Babel?
I'm not sure. Are you thinking of Nimrod?
I think certainly Nimrod. He was the owner of the Babel Construction Company.
Yeah.
CEO.
And you can certainly see some of these concepts in him as a person. That wasn't the only city he founded. Yeah, he was very much about
Just
self-promotion.
an interesting side note, just to strengthen the connection between sin and technology. You're talking about how technology was bad. After the first sin, after they eat the fruit, what is the first thing? They realize they're naked because their eyes are open. What's the first thing they do? They sew fig leaves. So that's the first technology ever invented.
The first craft of mankind is sewing. So the first invention is a needle. They didn't weave it, which just takes them and uses it. They sewed it.
They imposed their own. So anyway, that's just a side note.
And then, of course, you have the first city founder is the first murderer, and it ends with his descendants and all their technology, metallurgy and leatherworking and
Musical instruments.
anyway, so there's a lot there, but it has to do with mankind building themselves up. So this ruined city, this city of chaos that Nasby says, this, according to my ear, a better translation would be the city without meaning.
And we're still referring to verse 10 there, the ruined city. So these are synonyms.
So yeah, so God in creation is taking a chaotic world and he's separating it. He's saying, I'm going to make the land and the sea and the sky. And I'm going to make land creatures and sea creatures and birds for the sky. And I'm going to make all these, everything's ordered. This city of mankind, it's metaphor for the this worldliness of the world, right? This human condition is chaotic because they've cut the grand orderer out of their order, and they said, we'll make our own order, and it ends up becoming utterly chaotic and meaningless. Think about why meaningless, right? If you have a lump of clay, if you order it into a shape that has purpose and a meaning, right? If you see something that's shaped like this, it has a purpose. It's a big cup. Okay, a lump of clay doesn't have a purpose, but a big cup has a purpose and therefore a meaning. What's the meaning of this? The meaning is it's a thing you can use. And so if you say, we're going to go back to the chaos way of doing things where God's order is not involved, then it's a city. It's just like we're living our lives. I mean, the life of a worldly person is just one thing and then another thing and then another thing. And oh, now I'm old and now my life's over. And there was no purpose and no meaning and no order to their lives. It was just a thing, like a big lump of clay without a shape. So that's the chaotic city, the city of meaninglessness.
You can see there's more philosophy to it.
Yeah,
A little bit
and then
deeper.
the next line in verse 10, the entrance to every house is barred. In the city, now it's going to be destroyed. Of course, this whole section is about how God's going to someday destroy it. But while it's here, why are they all barring their houses? Is it a great community? No, it's not a great community. There's a pervasive fear, and because of who they are and how they are, they have to bar their houses. So this time, this universal Babel, God doesn't scatter them and separate their languages, but the very nature of their sin separates them from each other. They're barring their houses against each other. So this time the punishment is just inherent in what they're doing. That's the case in all sin, isn't it? If God suddenly said, you know what, I'm going to say you're allowed to sin for one day, and there'll be no consequences. Well, the consequences are inherent in the sin. If I lie to her, maybe I'm automatically forgiven because God gave me a pass, but she's still going to trust me less. That's just the nature of it. If I say, the garage door's up, when really it's down, then she's going to drive a hole through the garage door because I told her it was up and she thought it was up. So just the very nature of sin, those are silly examples, but the very nature of sin causes destruction. The wages of sin is death. It's not like God's like arbitrarily saying, I'm going to make them cause death if they do A, B, or C. Just the A, B, and C cause death and destruction.
That's how he designed the world.
Yes. Okay, well, so that's the little mini chiasm within the big chiasm of our chapters.
24 to 27.
Now, let's see if you can, we're not going to find too much, but let's just see if you can make any connections between that section we just covered, 7 through 12, and then the other focus of this chiasm, 13 through 16. If you can make any connections there, and then somebody else would, I have a volunteer to try to give a title to as many of these 6 sections as you can. Start with the middle 2, just give them a title. This section is about blank. Start with the middle 2 and then move to the next 2, and if you have time, get to the first and last 2.
You might not have time to let you thoroughly.
You're not going to thoroughly get it all, but it's still. But, so can I have one, is everyone looking for connections between these 2 and one person giving a title to this, and then a title to this, and then a title to this, and then lastly, if you have time, a title to this and this. Anybody want to volunteer to do that? Nobody? Okay. Katie, your job is to do the titles then. Okay, anybody find any connections? Anything interesting?
Instead of the joyful timbrels being still, they're shouting for joy.
Mm-hmm, good, yeah. A definite contrast. The stilled, stopped, silent, all that is contrasted with shouting for joy, acclaiming, giving glory, and singing in 16.
Right, yeah, the first from 7 to 32, it's all bad. And from 14 to 16, it's all good.
Yeah. Good. And so 7 through 12 is about the human city, the city without meaning, and 13 through 16 is about who?
So God's realm.
Look at verse 13.
Well, yeah, 13.
Well, like in 7, the new wine and the vine dry up and wither. But at the end of 13, what happens to the grapes there? There's some that are left. Some good ones that are.
So
it's the gleaning in verses 14 through 16.
where do the gleanings come from in 14 through 16? What? The remnant. So and where do they come from? There's verse 14 from the west, therefore in the east. 15, the islands of the sea, the ends of the earth. So, you've got imagine a whole field full of grapes, and the harvesters come through and get them all. But there's still, a few individuals left, but originally it was like totally full. And so they come through and they get them all, but there's a couple here and there. Yes?
Wouldn't it be just a God-fearing people in a world of sinners?
Yes. But what's going to happen is God's going to come through and destroy the city of humanity, and there's just going to be a few left.
Wouldn't they be the God-fearing ones?
Yes. So, think about the image of that. That's the opposite. This is the ends of the earth. That's the opposite image of a city. A city is when all the people come together, but the gleanings, the image of gleaning is just a big spread out field. There's just a couple here and there, spread far apart from each other. Yes?
Wouldn't this be similar to when the apostles, after Jesus, they went out to try to spread the word of Jesus among the have-nots, so to speak? Isn't that very similar?
Yeah,
Because it was spreading the word of Jesus, which is similar to what's happening
yeah.
here.
I never really thought about a connection about that. I have to think about that more. Especially because of the concept of how rapidly it spread at that point in history.
But here, there was a city that he left in ruins, and what was left was the opposite of a city. That's where you were.
Yes.
It's just a scattered remnant.
A scattered remnant, but not just a remnant of the Jewish people, a remnant from all the nations of the earth, the east and the west and the islands and the ends of the earth. And those are the people that God brings in. So right there you've got a little microcosm of this whole section of 4 chapters. You've got the destruction of the lofty city and the gathering in, the gleaning in of the remnant, the joyful remnant that's going to sing praises and give acclaim and exalt the Lord.
So you can see God already kind of making his new city.
And what are they singing in 16? Glory to the righteous one. Not glory to us, we've built a city. Glory to his name. Which a few chapters down, or about 1 chapter down, it talks about exalting his name, which is another connection with Babel. No. Oh yeah, I give the titles for those 2 sections.
Yeah, just if it helps you. The titles I came up with for 7 through 12, I said, songs stilled by the fall of the meaningless city. And then, I can let you write that down if you want. And then for 13 through 16, songs heard from worldwide gleanings. So you can see how that's...
Yes, very good.
Isaiah was no dummy. He knew what he was doing.
No. And of course this book is the product of a whole lifetime of ministry. He had a long ministry. And when he put this together, it's from different sections of his ministry, but he arranged it all very carefully. So this isn't just like something he slapped together in a few months. Okay, I want to point out a couple things here. This is a fun one. On this side it says, verse 27, 1, it says, "In that day the Lord will punish with his sword, his fierce, great, and powerful sword, Leviathan, the gliding serpent." Leviathan, the coiling serpent. He will slay the monster of the sea. The monster of the sea is symbolic of the raging, chaotic sea.
That's not in your notes.
That's not in your notes. No, that's just a fun little tidbit there that I found. And then another one is there's definitely clear parallels between the lofty city, and this is in your notes. So let's go straight to the notes. We're going to focus on this section and pick up a few things from the other side, which is the New Jerusalem. So, okay, can you read 20? Oh no, yeah, read this whole section. This is the center of the big chiasm, 6 through 12. So just follow along and note anything about the New Jerusalem.
So we've moved on from the meaningless city, and now we're on to the New Jerusalem.
A big contrast, yeah. These are God's gleaning people. He's gathered together.
Chapter 25, 6 through 12, where are you?
Yes,
Okay.
25, 6 through 12. Sorry about that. Yeah, so God, with the gleanings of the remnant, brings together his own city.
Oh, yeah, you're right there.
This section, you're going to read this section
Sorry.
about God's
That was a weird.
city. Yes, I'm sorry.
On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats, and the finest of wines. On this mountain he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever.
What is this mountain? It is Zion. It's the holy mountain Zion. So that is the New Jerusalem. It'll call it Zion, it'll call it Jerusalem, it'll call it the holy mountain, it'll call it just this mountain. It's all the same.
The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. The Lord has spoken. In that day they will say, "Surely this is our God. We trusted in him and he saved us."
So what good things, there's at least 3 good things that we've had so far in this New Jerusalem.
Peace.
We have a shroud of Jesus, and he
No
covers
death.
all of us.
Good, no death, good.
No death, huh?
No tears, no disgrace.
The Messiah, basically, isn't
The feast, yes, is going to be regarding him. You're thinking of the shroud. I think the shroud is symbolic of death.
Or maybe the fear of death.
Think about, it says, on this mountain he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all the nations. He will swallow up death. Death is the universal thing that weighs on all humans.
I think a shroud is a word for the wrappings you put over a dead person.
Yes, but in this case he's referring to death. He's going to destroy death.
It conjures the same image.
So yeah, we got no more death, we've got a feast, we've got no more tears, no more disgrace. Now, how he's going to do that is going to be through the Messiah, but that's not exactly clear in this passage. That's going to be unpacked starting in chapter 40.
Hold on.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
But yeah, go ahead.
Surely this is our God. We trusted in him and he saved us. This is the Lord. We trusted in him. Let us rejoice and be glad in his salvation. The hand of the Lord will rest on this mountain, but Moab will be trampled in their land, as straw is trampled down in the manure. They will stretch out their hands in it, as swimmers stretch out their hands to swim. God will bring down their pride despite the cleverness of their hands.
Okay, so it's referencing back to the lofty city, the proud. He's going to trample them down despite the cleverness of their hands. Right? You see that? That's all the whole Babel thing. That's the whole human city. We can do it. The next line in 12, he will bring down your high fortified walls and lay them low. You trust in your own abilities, but God's going to bring you down. Let's turn the page. Go ahead, 26:1.
In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. God makes salvation. Its walls and ramparts.
So there's the city of Tohu, the city of confusion and chaos and meaninglessness, and
Made
now
by
there's
human hands and technology.
and now in 26 we have a strong city God makes salvation its walls and ramparts.
Oh, I see that now. I read it wrong.
It's okay. So there's some parallels and contrasts there. And 27, 5 and 6.
Or else let them come to me for refuge. Let them make peace with me. Yes, let them make peace with me. In days to come, Jacob will take root, Israel will bud and blossom, and fill all the world with fruit.
So taking refuge in the Lord, making peace with Him, brings about my participation in this New Jerusalem. And of course, how all that works out, the New Testament makes all that clear. And then there's some Eden imagery there, but we don't have time. Last one, 27.
And you, Israel, will be gathered up one by one, and in that day a great trumpet will sound. Those who were perishing in Assyria and those who were exiled in Egypt will come and worship the Lord on the holy mountain in Jerusalem.
So that's So that's chapters 24 through 27. It's about the lofty city, and you can see if you look at that picture, it basically has it all right there. The lofty city is going to be brought down, and the New Jerusalem is going to be the remnant. And it says, God's kingdom over all nations, no more suffering or death on that little picture.
We talked about, on the last section we just read about 27, 12 to 13, we talked before about how he used pictures of the exile in Egypt to be like a symbol or an example of what's going to happen to them in Assyria, or is happening to them, the northern kingdom in Assyria.
And what
So he just does that again.
happened to the southern kingdom in Babylon.
You should know that because we've been learning it, is the point.
Basically, they're saying that these people who were killed there, the resurrection, they'll be back.
Well, I think he's saying the people who are perishing, they're just exiled right now in Assyria, but he's saying they will come back. The remnant will return.
This is a...
But yeah, but that too.
After the 70 years.
But he went all the way back to the exile in Egypt, and he's also talking about that current exile in Assyria, and he is also talking about the ultimate day of the Lord when there will be the resurrection. So it's really all three of those all in one.
Yeah, it's the lowercase day of the Lord versus capital day of the Lord.
But they're both
situation.
implied. So. Yeah, very good.
Yes. I do think the main one in that passage is the ultimate one, Michael, that you were saying. But yes, all of the God rescuing his people is always an image for the ultimate rescue from this world and from death, and from sin. Okay, any other... Yes?
Tower of Babel, you think that's the same geographical spot as Babylon, the city of Babylon, when they became great and mighty? You think they're kind of like the co-located?
But it could
I
be
don't...
like it's the same part of the world.
Yeah, it's probably the same part of the world, but I don't think that it's necessarily the same spot. I think
What's China?
more symbolically, it was a city over there that was aspiring to have that. As far as the history of the historical connection between them, I don't really know. But the literary connection between them is clear by the writers of the Bible.
I've flown over Babylon, Iraq, and there's nothing there. A small town called Babylon. It's just a small little town. Although I was always looking for maybe remnants of a tower that might have been up out of the earth. If there was, it's all covered by sand.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like the
Like
like
roughly how many years ago was Babel?
Babel. 5,000 years ago,
Yeah.
4,500.
That's a lot of sandstorm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've seen sandstorm come through and everything's covered. Your tracks, your tire tracks, you don't know where you came from.
Wow.
It can happen fast.
Yeah.
Thousands of years. Everything is
Yes. Okay. Well, that was great, and I'll see you next week.
Hopefully you have a better understanding of 23 through through 27 or 24? 24 through 27?
Yes, and we'll be moving on next week.
Yeah, you mentioned in previous classes about themes in Isaiah, that it may hint at something here and then it expands it later. Do you have anything, or are you going to give us anything that connects those dots so that the themes and their expansions and focus can be clear?
What would be ideal would be if I gave you theme and then a bunch of references so you could trace it out yourself.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
You should go through different colors.
I should color code it all. Yeah,
Yeah.
I should print out the book of Isaiah with everything color coded and then.
No need to come to class.
Do that, so they haven't got room to put it anywhere.
But
Just the references, as you mentioned, I think for me personally would be perfectly fine. I don't need all of that.
no, I know.
Yeah.
That is a really good idea.
But like we picked up the theme of the day of the Lord, and so
Yeah.
you just kind of see it as you go. But yeah,
And the New Jerusalem was in chapter 2, and then in chapter 11 a lot, and now again it's resurfacing. And the God bringing down the proud, that's the day of the Lord theme. That's all throughout. But yeah, I should make a list so that people can trace it out.
that'd be a good tool.
That's a good idea, thank you.
Close this in prayer.
Yeah, I'll close in prayer.
Do I need to email you that because I gave it to you verbally? You said you didn't remember.
If I
At
don't,
least a text.
if I don't
Not happen.
ever produce it, then yeah, definitely email me about it.
You're too young to do that.
God, thank you so much for this time together. I pray that you would be honored through this and that we would not seek our own glory and our own pleasures, but we would seek your glory and your honor. In Jesus' name, amen.